What we talking about today then, Kelly?
What's the weirdest thing somebody has objected to in the workplace for you? I was thinking visible tattoos for obvious reasons, but it wasn't, I've not experienced it, but I had a new member of staff who came into work one day and I happened to be wearing something sleeveless or short sleeved. And they just stopped and jaw dropped. You're allowed to show your tattoos here? And because they'd been not only reprimanded for allowing tattoo to show, but the organization changed the dress code policy to prohibit tattoos.
That is
It was such an
outrageous.
overreaction. It's like, I'm pretty sure what's on my skin does not affect my ability to do my job in any way, shape, or form. And I was just flabbergasted by that. And I said, absolutely be yourself. I have no problem
Mm.
with, whatever you wear as long as you are professional and decent and reasonably
Yeah.
clean. I have no
Yeah.
objections.
I That's the key element, or the one only bit where it could ever be a problem. My mum used to be in charge of a nursing program at university, and they once had a student doing mental health nursing who had a syringe like on their arm, but that could be quite triggering to patients, or it could be inappropriate, so they had to keep it covered. That was the only time I'd ever thought about it, because I was like, what, why is it a problem? I find very strange this thing about tattoos and jewelry and clothes and everything. It's like no one ever objects if you wear a bright pink suit that makes everyone's eyes hurt. That's okay. But then you have like a tiny little flower on your wrist and it's suddenly objectionable. I find it very strange how we like to police, and it is often women's bodies more than men's bodies,
Mm.
partly because the clothes we wear might show it off more, or it's seen as less feminine and things like that. But yeah, but I've never seen anyone picked up for tattoos. I've worked with quite a few people
I
with
had
them.
I had somebody very sheepishly ask if they could speak to me one to one, and it was one of those ones where I thought, oh no, she's going to resign. And actually, all it was, I have a tattoo on my foot, and it is now sandal weather. Am I allowed to wear sandals? And I was like, why are you even asking me this? Of course you can. Like, do whatever
Yeah.
you want. But yeah, the sheepishness of the way that she asked me made it clear that I was in a minority of managers who would
Yeah.
be so open. I was just like, that's ridiculous.
I always wanted a full sleeve. I didn't get one because I was worried about being judged and career prospects and things. So I got it as a present to myself for my 40th birthday, belatedly. So that was my gift. And I figured if I'm not established in my professional reputation by now, then I'm never going to be. So it doesn't matter. But I find myself going into new situations around people I don't know yet, where I'm expecting to be judged, or I'm worried about being judged. And I think about, covering, choose my clothing very carefully to until I until I know how safe it is. And it's that
Mm.
sort of and I find that about other aspects of who I am, and not being less authentic, but just being a little bit more guarded, a little more closely careful until you get that safe space and you feel like you can be yourself, which is a weird, like, you shouldn't have to be afraid to be yourself. And as a manager, I
Mm.
always try and make people, I try to make the environment psychologically safe so that people can come as themselves to work and be productive and not be spending energy on something like hiding their tattoos or hiding their piercings or something. But it's a funny thing when you find yourself thrown back into it. Why am I doing that? What am I worried about here? And I was absolutely in floods of worry over the weekend about what to wear. I had an event today, and what I was going to wear, and whether I was going to wear the right shoes, and should I wear the heels or should I be comfortable, and should I, and, you know, and I ended up taking both pairs of shoes, and I wore the uncomfortable heels because I wanted to look professional. And then I got there, and everybody's in trainers or Birkenstocks, or I was thinking, what was I so worried? It was absolutely fine. So I immediately slipped my trainers back on as I was leaving.
I think I usually, well, no, not usually. I don't do it anymore because I don't work in an institution, but I over time started including that sort of thing in induction stuff. So in the kind of welcome email and like, I'll meet you at reception at 9:30 on your first day, I'd always include some sense of kind of what the vibe is in terms of clothing in the office, so that people didn't have that experience, because I think it does make a difference on your first day, like walking in a full business attire and then everyone's just in jeans and t-shirt, or the other way round, is really stressful because you instantly feel like you don't fit in.
That's such a good idea. I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to add that to my onboarding pack immediately.
No, it is a good idea.
Yeah. Because you say when and where to meet, but you know, when you get an invitation to an event, you know, a wedding or something, they always give you a clue to the dress code. But we expect people to sort of guess what will be acceptable.
Especially if interviews have been online, so you haven't even been in the building yet that the job is
seen anybody else.
Yeah. Clothing it's a funny one office-wise. I think things have got more relaxed, but then I also think, or maybe it's also partly because I've got more relaxed. I just see it that way. Very early in my career, when I first started working out of university, and I worked in a local authority with elected councillors, you know, the significant majority of them were like my grandparents' age, and they took one look at me and thought, you know, are you here for work experience? And I was on the same level as a male colleague who was 20 years older than me, but we had the same title with the same level. But I spent that 3 years of my life with people thinking I worked for them, but the age was such a big barrier so I dressed in like suits, like trousers and skirts, suits and shirt. I had to project a level of like aggressive confidence and seniority to like to kind of counterbalance some of those assumptions that were being made about me. But you know, it didn't work. I've just remembering being in a licensing panel hearing, so public committee, press in the gallery, chair, it's quasi-judicial, so you have like a panel member of 3, a bit like you would have magistrates of elected councillors making decisions about taxi licensing and liquor licensing. The chair asked me a question, and I was like flicking, you know, to find the right page in the Constitution to answer the question. And he said, hurry up. And he rolled his paperwork up and like, because he was higher than me, and like bopped me on the head and was like, hurry up, love. Like this. And I remember looking up and like past the solicitor, past of the taxi driver, the licensing officer, and catching the licensing officer's eyes. And his eyes was like, but obviously you have to be the bigger person and not turn around and say, do not whack me on the head with my papers like I'm a naughty kitten. Get out of my face. And I never said anything. I didn't pick up with him afterwards, nothing, because I didn't feel like I could or empowered to do things like that. But it was also a point where I thought, it doesn't matter what I do. I'm not necessarily, you know, they're going to not take me seriously. And actually, I just need to be really good at my job. And I don't need to fight so hard with thinking about maybe how I present myself, because they're just going to think I'm young and inexperienced and therefore not necessarily up to scratch, whatever I do. It was mostly very patronizing ageism and sexism in that job. It was in another job in HE where it was more sleazy, but and then that was more like, make sure you buttoned up your shirt tight. They come and hover over your desk. Ooh. Anyway, I think every woman's dealt with some of that in their career, if not on the bus, just to get to work. But yeah, so I think that dressing and covering and what we show, and like there's layers and layers to it, isn't there, about what we do with the hair, whether we wear makeup or not. Women have such pressure.
When I cut my hair, people started treating me differently.
Really?
I'm much more approachable with long hair, apparently. Yep.
That is bizarre.
Yeah.
It's very
I
bizarre.
mean, it works quite well for me, actually. It's good to not be bothered all the time.
Yeah, I always see women with haircut, with short haircuts like yours, Fiona, are just confident, self-assured women who know their stuff and know what they're doing.
Stylish.
Well,
yeah.
obviously,
Far more
along
put
with
together than
that
me.
is the additional, they're confident, they know their stuff, and we shan't bother them. Typically, when people are like, can you do this? I'm like, oh yeah. No, Fiona, stop it. You can't do everything. Stop it.
I'm never knowingly undercommitted. He says that's my life motto.
Yeah.
Fairly accurate description.
I've trained myself out of that to some extent. When I think I've talked before in an episode about using transition points as a kind of a reset. And when I left an institution and moved to another institution, and I've got into quite some bad tangles of that, like being the go-to person for everything, I have consciously been working at it since to have firm boundaries with myself as well about being too helpful. Finding that balance and sitting in that discomfort sometimes, because it does feel discomforting, but it does take practice. But even just things like, I'm not sure, I don't think I'd be the most appropriate person to support with that, like it still feels really uncomfortable to say, even when it's a really correct thing. There's someone better qualified and better able to support that, but it still feels like you shouldn't say no.
I very much enjoy falling back on the coaching question of, well, what do you think? Just makes me so happy, and people hate it.
Yeah. I had one of my team leaders in a previous role said to me, it must be so tiring and busy for you having all of us, there was like 5 of them, always asking you for, interrupting your time, asking you for things, asking you to help with that, and you have to do so much. And I was like, but do I ever actually do anything? She thought about it for a minute. No. You just ask me lots of questions and I go away and sort it out. It's like, yes. That is a coaching style of leadership. It's all within yourself. You don't need me. I'm just here to facilitate.
Just lending you that extra mental bandwidth.
I now can't even remember the original question that you asked.
I don't think it matters, because I think we're out of time.
We're out of time. That's it for this week.
All right.
You're the weird and wonderful.
See you next time.
See you next time.